Pokemon is the series that got me into gaming as a kid. All this time I waste as an adult playing video games, it all started with me begging my parents for a Game Boy so I could be just like Ash Ketchum and become a Pokemon master. Even though I was a fan of the anime and trading card games since Gen 1, Pokemon Gold was my first game, and I have so many fond memories picking Cyndaquil as my starter, raising him to level 100, and then learning how to build an actual team that wasn't just an overpowered Typhlosion. I remember exploring the vast world, encountering secrets, secretly staying up late holding my Game Boy up to a nightlight as I discovered how to catch Unknown. I remember getting stuck on the Ice Path puzzle, not being able to beat Whitney, not being able to beat Lance, but when I finally did, I felt unstoppable. And of course, I remember my friend letting me use his Game Shark to get infinite rare candies and Master Balls, which ended up breaking my save file so I couldn't wake up Snorlax, so I had to start a new game and get a completely different overpowered Typhlosion. Anyway, these are some of my most positive memories from my childhood, and as I celebrated my birthday this year, finally turning, let's say I turned 21 again, I felt a desire to experience that magic all over again. Unfortunately, as we all know, recreating your childhood is impossible. I've actually replayed the classic Pokemon games several times throughout my adulthood, so many times that nothing in them really wows me anymore. I know I could always just do a Nuzlocke challenge, which I tried to do in the past, but either lost too many Pokemon or just lost interest. And there are several of the new games I haven't played, but Pokemon Shield disappointed me, and Brilliant Diamond somehow managed to be even worse than the game it remade, so I just didn't want to give Game Freak any of my money. But then I remembered the passionate Pokemon fan game community. There are so many fan games and ROM hacks out there created by dedicated fans in their free time. They definitely vary in quality, but the best of them have way more passion put into them than anything Game Freak's released in a very long time. For example, I recently played Pokemon Infinite Fusion for the first time, and a couple years ago I replayed Pokemon Insurgence. These two are very different fan games, but both amazing in different ways. And then I remembered Pokemon Reborn. I had played it back in 2019, back before the full version was out, but quit out of frustration due to a section that I don't think had been completely playtested at that point. But even so, I had fond memories of the game and knew I would want to try it again when the final version came out, and I just found out the final release was 2 years ago on the day I started writing this script. I actually attempted another playthrough during a drunk stream last year, but, well, I was drunk and I forgot to save, so I just abandoned it. So sometime last month, I realized that now was the perfect time to finally try it again, and I fell in love with it even harder than I did before. It's been about a month and a half, and I've beaten the game multiple times, and this is a long game, with 18 badges and an extensive post-game. So, of course, I really wanted to do another playthrough, but this time I thought it would be fun to actually document my progress and share my journey with the world. Even though, like I just said, this isn't a blind playthrough, it's still a very challenging game, and there are several battles that I only won by either cheap strategies or revive spamming, which I'm hoping to avoid in this playthrough. Not to mention, there are so many different ways to team build and win battles that I'm looking forward to trying new strategies. I don't really know how this series will turn out, or if I'll even finish it. I just really wanted to talk about this game. This isn't really going to be a full walkthrough, more of a recap of my adventures, but there are several great guides out there if you're playing and need some help. Also, this series will contain spoilers and will discuss some of the more sensitive plot elements, but I'll try to add trigger warnings so you aren't accidentally scarred for life after seeing this kind of stuff in a Pokemon game. Also, this game has a password system that allows you to modify the game in various ways, from quality of life mods to mods that make the game more challenging to mods that make the game super easy. This stuff is kind of boring, but I just have the need to explain the ones I'm using in order to justify them, I guess. The first one is Perfect IVs, which I'll admit makes the early game slightly easier, but at some point in the game all your opponents will have Perfect IVs, so this just levels the playing field and saves me hours of breeding. The second is Easy HMs, which eliminates the need to teach HMs and other field moves to your Pokemon because every single move slot is valuable. I've beaten the game without this password on, and let me tell you, it's hell. Next, I'm using the Weather Mod password, which I won't be using much, but there are a few Pokemon and events you can only get during certain weather, so once again, it's just saving me time if I want them. Then I'm using Hardcap, a password that saves me a lot of frustration in ways I'll explain later. And finally, just for fun, I'm using the early shiny charm. This game has entirely custom shinies, some of which look really cool, and using the shiny charm, I believe, gives you a 1 out of 30 chance to encounter a shiny. With that out of the way, it's time to begin our journey. I get on a train to Reborn City in order to challenge their new Pokemon League. Apparently, the city is an absolute dump, almost as bad as Detroit. But their gym leaders are some of the strongest out there, so I can't think of a better way to prove myself as a trainer. It can't be too hard, right? So I'm just chilling on the train when I look out the window and see an Absol, which is actually my favorite Pokemon, but who is also known for warning people of impending danger. Anyway, the league manager, Ame, introduces herself to me and mentions some sort of incident a few years ago that led both people and Pokemon to abandon the city. As we talk, I barely notice the shadowy figure behind me, and suddenly I'm pushed out the window as seconds later, the train crashes and explodes. As I come to, I realize that Ame saved my life, but there's no time to mourn the lost, as there's suddenly a major shift in tone. This green-haired girl is named Julia, and she loves explosions. But no, it wasn't her that blew up the train. She was at her Jimmy gym when she heard the explosion, and seems a bit upset that she wasn't there to see it. Julia, people died. Anyway, they come to the conclusion that this was some kind of deliberate attack, but I'm told not to worry about it since I need to go to the Grand Hall and register for the league. I then find out that Julia is the electric-type gym leader, and I'll be facing her very soon. You see, while most regions have 8 gyms, Reborn has 18, one for each type. So I head over to the Grand Hall and meet a girl named Victoria, who's also taking the League Challenge. Look like I already have a rival. We head inside, and I'm soon taken upstairs for one of the most iconic moments in every Pokemon game, choosing my first Pokemon. While normal games have you pick one of 3 starters, Reborn has every single starter from Gens 1 through 7. That means 21 Pokemon to choose from. Something else that makes this more interesting is that every single Pokemon can have their hidden ability, which means, yes, Speed Boost Blaziken. That means there are a lot of starters that make the game a lot easier, such as the aforementioned Torchic, Froakie with Procyon, or even Snivy with Contrary. But I'm not looking for easy. I'm looking for trustworthy. I'm going with one of my oldest friends. The first starter I ever picked, Cyndaquil. And Cyndaquil has a pretty good hidden ability of its own, Flash Fire. Anytime it's hit with a Fire-type move, it does no damage, and its own firepower will increase. I decide to name him after the Greek god of blacksmithing, known for forging powerful weapons inside a volcano. Actually, I named him after an FF14 raid boss, but don't tell anyone. Now that I have a Pokemon, it's time for our first battle. You may have expected me to battle Victoria, but while she went upstairs to pick her starter, I was ambushed by a femboy twink named Kane, who aggressively flirted with me before assaulting me with his Nidoran. Now at this point in the game, all you can really do is tackle each other, so this battle wasn't very interesting, except for the fact that Nidoran was actually slightly stronger than Hephaestus, and I would have lost the first battle if he didn't miss a tackle. But I won, leveling up and learning Smokescreen. After I heal up, Victoria comes up to me, mentions something about her sensei, and shows me the starter she picked, Litten. Something I really like about this game is that instead of just picking the starter yours is weak against, or strong against in the later games because the target audience is little babies, you have multiple strong rivals in this game who always pick the same starter every time. More on that later. Anyway, this was an even easier win, and now I can finally get my Pokedex and Pokegear. While Victoria gives me Pokeballs while once again talking about her sensei. Now, the game can finally begin for real. The first thing I do is buy even more balls because I know I'm going to need as many Pokemon as possible for my journey. Since money is hard to come by during the early game, I make sure to only buy in increments of 10 so I can get free Premier Balls. Then I step outside to battle a random trainer, only to get my ass beat by his Bidoof. Even with perfect IVs, Cyndaquil still has a mediocre attack stat, so he's gonna be pretty terrible until he gets Ember. But I have Leer, which will make my tackles hit a little bit harder. Unfortunately, my brain decided to turn off, and I didn't realize I was only using Leer until it was too late, and Hotshot Eric and his Bidoof kicked my ass for the second time. In our third battle, I used Leer once, and then tackled that stupid beaver to death. But I know that even this early in the game, having just one Cyndaquil isn't going to cut it. So it's time to catch some Pokemon. Only there's not much tall grass around. So I go up and find some punks bullying a Pachirisu. Since I only have one Pokemon, they won't even give me the time of day, so I guess I have to find something else. With the power of the no HM's password, I decide to headbutt a tree and find a Spearow. An easy catch, but I can do better. I then find a Combi, but it's male, so it can't evolve. But also I can't escape for some reason. Then, I find what I'm looking for. Pineco. Right now, it has a bad typing for a defensive Pokemon, but I have other reasons for really wanting this little guy that may or may not involve exploding. I catch him before he explodes on me and give him a cute nickname that I blatantly stole from a Reddit video. Also, Hephaestus learned Ember! With 3 Pokemon, I'm finally able to battle these thugs and save Pachirisu, who I'll probably never use, but it's better than nothing. With 4 Pokemon, I make my way to the Electric Gym, but no one's here since Julia's off trying to deal with the explosion. I know that's where I need to go to progress the plot, but I still want to fill out my team more. As I explore the city, I realize that, yes, Reborn City is a complete dump. Pollution, homelessness, prostitution, drug abuse, trash, and broken glass littering the ground, and at one point I am pretty sure I saw some sort of tentacle monster destroying part of the city. Oh well, it's probably nothing. I try looking in whatever meager patches of grass I can find, but since it's nighttime, I can only really find Spinarak, which I don't need. But then I go under this bridge and find Noibad. Noibad is a cool little guy who evolves into one of the coolest Pokemon ever, but believe it or not, it's not what I'm here for. I actually want the infinitely stupider looking bat you can find here. Woobat. Why, you ask? Simple. The ability's simple. Every stat change this guy gets is multiplied. Yes, this is a double-edged sword, but since it gets Calm Mind, it's absolutely invaluable in the early game. After giving him a silly bat-themed nickname, I head off to find more Pokemon, and believe it or not, one of the most powerful Pokemon ever is in this building right here. And this purple-haired girl named Shelly wants me to take care of him. No, I'm not memeing. It's not just his cry that makes him a god. After exploring a little more, I come back to the train station, where the survivors are being treated by a purple-haired man who doesn't seem like a real doctor based on the way he's almost trauma-dumping on his patients, but the police seem to trust him. I walk around, picking up whatever hidden items I remember being on the ground, including this ability capsule, get into some fights, and my Cyndaquil evolves into Quilava. Then I randomly stumble into a dark building, only to find a tiny little friend. I've never actually found this event before, so I get very excited, since I know Joltik gets a certain move that will make a lot of future battles easier. Anyway, now that I have a full team, it's time to investigate this explosion. I come across some little edgelord threatening a guy dressed in black by this suspicious-looking factory, and he gets angry that I'm interrupting his investigation. His name is Fern, and he introduces himself as the coolest kid ever, who doesn't want to waste his time with losers like me. I'm sorry, but anyone who unironically calls himself Swag Jockey is not a cool kid. This guy is our third rival, and yeah, he's the edgy one. He kinda reminds me of what would happen if Gary Oak was present at the January 6th insurrection. He has 2 grass types on his team, both of whom are destroyed by my bug and fire types, and I would have been able to sweep his entire team with Kricketune if it weren't for that paralysis. But not even Sandile could get in the way of Hephaestus. And even worse for this edgelord, he's soon told off by an actual inspector to not put his amateur nose in official business. Of course, this doesn't actually stop him from wanting to raid the base of these terrorists, and I get roped into joining him. It's sealed shut, but fortunately our explosion-loving friend Julia and her Electrode create an entrance for us. And she brought another friend to help us out. This is Florinia, and she has a strange quirk of speaking like a robot. We also find out that she's Fern's older sister and another gym leader. We also learn that this terrorist group is called Team Meteor, and yes, they're basically the Team Rocket of this game. Anyway, we head inside, but they're expecting us. Probably because we weren't exactly subtle coming in. But we decide to split up, and unfortunately I'm stuck with Fern as my partner. I get free healing in between battles though, so that's nice. When we head up, we're greeted by the amalgamation of every Tumblr user's wet dream. This overly flamboyant character is Ace, and they're one of Team Meteor's admins. They also weren't added to the game until the final release, so I didn't remember them at all from my first playthrough all those years ago. They disappear after a dramatic speech, and we're left to fight through a bunch of grunts as we look for a passcode to get us further into the base. Unfortunately, Fern's AI is kinda whack and his team isn't that good, so sometimes he's a liability. But his grass types cover my team's major weakness to rock. While exploring the base, we find some information about projects Team Meteor was working on, but most of the data was deleted in anticipation of us stealing it. Oh well, that's probably the last time we'll hear about them. We find the passcode, and then Ace traps us in an elevator and tries to convince me to join Team Meteor, and I almost consider doing it just so I don't have to spend time with Fern anymore. But then Julia saves us by exploding something, and she sends us off to find more explosives. This next floor is pretty much the same as the first. Battle grunts, find 4 digits of the passcode, find information on Meteor projects. Unfortunately, the grunts guarding the explosives have Lunatone and Soul Rock, 2 rock types, and I have to rely on Fern to get them down for me. I also forgot that Guano had Assurance, which would have been super effective since they're also psychic. Guano goes down, and so does El Wee before he can use Absorb. And Fern's Badoo is also KO'd. So I try my Exploding Pine Cone, which does basically nothing. Not even the mighty Kricketune can stand up to these rock throws. But fortunately, Sandile pulls through and gets Soul Rock, and Lunatone on the next turn. I realize that after this, I need to put effort into making a better team. We find a box of Verdignite, an explosive green mineral made up specifically for this game, but Floridia manages to hack the door open before it explodes. And then it explodes 5 seconds later. Once we break in, we catch up with Ace and another mysterious Meteor admin with one eye, and he describes his team as Shepherds of the Region. But no, we don't get to fight One-Eyed Willy and Tumblr Sexy them, as the 2 gym leaders will deal with them. Instead, we fight the 2 grunts, Aster and Eclipse. And I'm ready for them. As long as they don't have any rock types, 2 grunts will be an easy battle. Fuck! Oh well, Badoo can take care of them. Fuck! Fortunately, Guano survives a hit and can get a confusion off, while one of the rock roughs was poisoned. Sadly, my team starts to get decimated again, and one of Sandile's sand tunes misses. But the next one hits and takes one of the rock roughs down. I'm hoping with its Moxie boost it can take the other one, but the AI decides to use Snatch, a move that does nothing, and it goes down. But then Hephaestus distracts the puppy, which allows Rowlet to KO. After we win, Team Meteor makes a tactical retreat, but not before declaring us enemies of the region. And I'll give you one guess as to what happens next. Yes, Julia blows up the entire base. Fern runs off, and Floridia mentions something about the situation in the Obsidia ward. Maybe that tentacle monster wasn't a hallucination after all. She then mentions field mechanics, which I think is what makes the game really fun. You see, every battle in the Meteor base was on a factory field, and if I used certain moves, they would have been boosted or had different effects, or even short-circuited the field. Factory Field is one of the more common and less interesting fields in the game, but we'll see more later, including at Julia's gym, which she invites us to after lamenting Florinia not being the same since the incident. While heading back to the Pokemon Center, we run into the trauma-dumping doctor again, but some hooligan steals the last of his medicine. I chase him into some back alley, and after taking on a Team Meteor base, he's an extremely easy fight, despite being constantly put to sleep by this fucking Skiploom. I recover the medicine and also find a data chip, which will allow me to add any passwords to the game that I forgot to add earlier. And yes, there is one. Also, I catch a Poochyena in the alleyway and name her Salmon, after a dog in Final Fantasy Reborn. I check her ability and she has Rattled, which means when she evolves it'll turn into Moxie, one of the best abilities in the game. I return the medicine to the purple guy, and he formally introduces himself as Corey. Even though he's clearly a bitter and cynical guy, he seems to have good intentions. And I doubt this is the last I'll see of him. Now it's time to level up my team for the gym. But how do I do that? This is where my next password comes in handy. Pinata. You see, in Reborn, grinding doesn't take too long, but it's still a little tedious. The best way to grind is by battling trainers in the Grand Hall, which will give you EXP candy. But with this password, all you have to do is talk to the trainers to get the candy, which saves a lot of time when I just want to get to the fun battles. And before you ask, no, you can't just use this to overlevel because this game has a level cap. But now, we're a full team. Guano the Noibat, Icon the Pineco, Hephaestus the Quilava, the Kricketune, El Wee Wee the Joltik, and Salmon the Mightyena. Once I get to the gym, I learn about Julia's field, Electric Terrain. Of course, electric moves are boosted on the field, but something else I noticed is that explosions also do more damage. Of course, I don't have any ground types, so my strategy going in is Technician Fury Cutter. After an explosive semi-puddle and a few easy gym trainers, it's time to fight Julia. The first thing I realized is that even though I reached the level cap with my team, Julia started the fight with a level 12 Minun, so I might have prepared a little too much. I start my Fury Cutter suite, but then she sends in the part-flying Oricorio, which resists bug moves. It also moves faster and is able to set up a Tailwind, but I KO it in 2 turns, along with the extremely slow Alolan Geodude she sends out. But I know I can't outspeed Electrode, one of the fastest Pokemon on the game even without Tailwind. But my powerful Cricket tanks a hit and takes it down. Unfortunately, Electrode's ability is Aftermath, which means the Fury Cutter sweep is over. But Julia only has weak Pokemon left, and Salmon is easily able to pick them off. But I have a fun idea for the finale. I decide to use Julia's signature move against her. Exploding Pine Cone! I get my badge, I get the TM for Charge Beam, and Julia runs out of batteries. That was an extremely easy gym fight, but I know that's not something I'll be saying about any more of these battles. And when I come outside, Victoria's waiting for me, and she wants me to help with the situation in the Obsidia Ward, which I'll do next time! So at this point of the game, I haven't even begun to crack the surface, but I've seen previews of what it has to offer, and it's enough to pull you in. I know a lot of people had issues with quote-unquote edgy fan games, but I personally love the edge, and the dark setting of Reborn pulled me in instantly. I do think the characters can seem a bit like anime stereotypes at times, but the game never really tries to pretend otherwise, and it's not really out of place in a Pokemon setting. But this game has a lot of characters, and in my opinion, we have yet to meet most of my personal favorites. And also my personal least favorites, but we'll get there. So anyway, thanks for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to leave a like and a comment, and subscribe if you want more. You can also follow me on Twitch. I had to take a break from streaming for personal reasons, but I'm trying to get back into it because it's something I really enjoy doing. Thank you so much, and stay tuned for the next installment.